I'm going to give you 3 techniques today so you can argue better. How would you like it to be able to argue better? There's a way to argue so you can win the argumentation, or there's also a way to argue so that you can win the relationship. What do I mean by that? Would you like to be able to argue with people so that you can build better relationships? You can build better relationships with your lover, better relationships with your friends. How to argue so you can build better relationships with your colleagues, your business partners, your customers, your clients. How do you argue better so you can build better relationships? It's a different skill set. I'm going to give you my 3 favorite strategies today, right now, that you can apply today, right now, on your relationships so you can become better. And you're going to love these techniques that I'm going to give you. And you've probably heard of maybe a few of them, but I'm going to talk about something that you probably never heard of before, you never expect. And stay tuned to the last tip because that's my absolute favorite tip. And it's the one that I use quite often. And if you've hung out with me long enough, you see me do these over and over and see me apply this over and over so I can have better relationships with people. There's one way to argue, and the argue is to win and get the people to dislike you or despise you or be put off by you, which is what most people do. And then there's another skill set in which you build better relationships and still be able to argue. And here's what the 3 tips are. But if it's the first time you're watching this, my name is Ron John. I'm the author of Relationships 101. I'm the head trainer at Great Relationships University at greatrelationshipsu.com. I have the #1 Tantra therapy in Las Vegas, and I've been a dating consultant and professional dominatrix for over a decade. So I want you to tune into these lives. I do them every day. I do my best to do them every day. Sometimes I have a lot of clients in one day and I have to postpone it. But certainly, for the most part, I do them all every day. So tune in, subscribe if you didn't already, and if you click the bell, what happens is you get a notification every time I'm live. So if you want to know when I'm live and you want to interact and interface on the chats, just click the bell icon, and YouTube will notify you. So what are the 3 tips? Now remember again that for you to argue and win and get them to not like you or despise you or be put off by you, it's a different skill set and technique and strategy of argumentation than if it is to win the relationship. So you can have better relationships with your lover, with your spouse, with your partner, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your customers, with your clients. And if you want that, follow these tips. And I strongly insist that you pay very close attention to this and make the intention that you build better relationships with other people. If the reasoning for your argumentation is not because you must win, such as if you're in court, then you must win, or if you're in a debate, then you must win, in a way, you certainly have to win the audience. In a professional debate, it's more important that you win the audience. But when you are in a daily life and daily communication with your partner, with your lover, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your business partners, with your clients, with your customers, you want to argue so you can win the relationship, so you can be in good standing with the relationship the best you can. Some people will just be completely put off by you at the outset and they will never be open-minded. Most people are not open-minded for argumentation, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're not open-minded to liking you. So, because the like bias is very important, but I'm going to digress. I'm going to leave that alone. If you want to know more about social dynamic skills, visit www.greatrelationshipsu.com, and you learn a lot about social dynamics and personal psychology and enlightenment and relationships strategies there. 12 hours of online course that you can use and implement right away. So here are the top 3 techniques that I can share with you on how to argue better. #1 is emotion is not a tool for argumentation. Emotion is not a tool for logic. Emotion is a completely different tool for other things, but it's not a tool for logic. Logic, original definition, logos, is your ability to reason. And so when you are arguing about something, you must already have in your head, be confident in your head, appreciate what your reasoning is for your argumentation, for your argument, for your point of view. In other words, I want you to build a strong case for your argument. Now, again, argument doesn't necessarily mean quarrel. Argument doesn't necessarily mean you're put off by each other or that you are against each other. Argumentation is simply you're having a perspective and you want to build a case for it and communicate that case. That is what it is to argue. Remember that argument, this is actually very important. I should have said this in the very outset of this video. Argument is not necessarily a bad thing. Argumentation could be a very good thing if both people or everyone involved in the communication wants to have that communication. Argument is simply you're proposing your point of view, building a case for it, and communicating it. Remember, again, remember this always. Argument is you're having a perspective, sharing that with the other person or the persons whom you're communicating with, building a case for it and being able to communicate it. That's a very important premise for argumentation. So argumentation is just you're communicating, but very specifically your point of view so that you can have a discourse about this. So argumentation, remember, is not a bad thing. It's often a good thing if you have two people who are willing to argue. Remember, if you have two people willing to argue, that's a very, very good thing. These are people who want to see the perspective of the other person, willing to communicate and discourse and bounce back ideas and be able to appreciate the other person's perspective and position. Remember that emotion is not a tool for logic. And I want you to be able to recognize this because you're going to have to be able to call them out on it and tell them, remember that emotion is not a tool for logic. I want you to provide for me a logical argument, a reasonable argument, an argument based on reason, logic, evidence, science. Scientific method is simply the method in which you have a theory, you prove that theory, and you're able to prove that theory. If you were to practice that theory over and over again, you're able to prove it that it's actually right, it's actually conclusively or non-conclusively something that you can rely upon. That is what the scientific method is. There is to be scientistic, which is to see what the politicians or the people that are scientists who are hired by politicians, what they say and believe that. And then there's something called the scientific method in which you take something, you take a theory, take something you hear, you test it out, you play it out, and see if it's something you can rely upon. If it's done again and again and again, you can rely upon it to create the same result. That is a scientific method. So when you yourself, you're creating an argumentation, provide logic rather than emotion. Emotion is only important when the argument is about how the person feels. But often than not, that's not the case. More often than not, what you're attacking, what you are arguing against are ideas. And remember, they are just ideas and human-made concepts. So people have different tools about that. So this is now, number 2 technique is very, very important. I want you to attack the problem, not the person. Attack the problem, not the person. Attack the ideas, not the person. And I say attack, but I want you to argue your perspective, your ideas about the problem or the ideas. Never attack the person. In fact, I want you to bring up the person. I want you to show some appreciation about the person. And what I like to say is, I like to let the person know, hey, you're very smart for recognizing that. Here's how I go about it. And I'm going to show you why I say that on technique number 3. But going back, number 2 is I want you to attack the problem, not the person. Don't call names, don't say names, don't call them names, don't offend them. You will just make them more, even though they don't believe in their argument. They're going to want to protect their side because they're now being attacked as a person. Rather than providing them with new information they haven't already considered yet. They haven't yet considered. And this is part of number 3. These are ideas they haven't yet considered, and you're proposing it to them, and you want them to consider it. You're better able to get them on your side and build that great relationship, even though you have different perspective, when you're able to provide them with new information for them to consider, rather than attacking them as a person. Don't call people names. It's probably not true. People are simply, I want you to always remember this for everything in your life. People are simply operating on the best knowledge that they have. Did you get that? Did you catch that? It's very important. People are simply operating on the best information, the best data set that they have. When you can provide them new information that they haven't considered, while they aren't in defense mode, when you attack them as a person, they're in defense mode and they will defend their ideas, even though they probably consider their ideas as wrong. So it's very important you praise them, you say, you appreciate them, and say, it's very smart of you. You're a very smart individual, very smart person to be able to communicate this with me at this level and being able to argue. Now you're framing them in a frame that they are open to argument. They're open-minded. Another way to get that started is to say, hey, I love that you're open-minded enough to be able to argue this point of view. Now remember that argument is not necessarily that we don't like each other. We're just attacking the problem and proposing our positions, building a case for it logically, and seeing if the other person is open to new ideas or which one works, if other ideas or other person's ideas work for them. Simple as that. We don't need to be on opposite sides. We could be good pals even. There are people around the world who are great friends despite their different beliefs in life, and that's completely okay. And cut. That is how I frame how I'm not attacking them as a person. In fact, I'm bringing them up on a level at which they can argue with me. Another part of number 2, attack the problem, not the person, is you want to attack premises. Because the reason most people argue is because the fundamental aspect of people's perspectives are their premises. What is the premise? If you can't handle the premise of the argument, meaning what is the foundation of their thinking, what is the very beginning of the logic that they have, if you don't change that, you can't change the surface fact. You can't change the other things. I should have thought of examples. So let's say, I'm not going to talk about religion. You want to attack the premise. I'll go over on other videos what premise is and how to argue against premises. But you remember that you don't want to attack the person. You want to bring them up, in fact, and you want to argue against the idea, the problem. You want to attack the problem, provide a solution, provide a different perspective. Number 3, don't argue unless they're open to communicating. Communication only occurs when? Communication only occurs when 2 people want to communicate. This is an incredibly important idea. This is an incredibly important philosophy. You can only communicate with someone who's open to communicating. And communication is sharing their ideas and considering each person's ideas. Without that, there is no communication. There's just one person talking and doing a monologue, not a dialogue. Monologue is one communication, one-way communication, and dialogue, and mono, dialogue is 2 people communicating. So when they don't want to communicate, none of the words you say matters. So don't argue with people. I actually very, very seldom argue. I recognize when it's worthwhile my arguing with them. And I have a lot of good ideas. I have a lot of great ideas. And when I hear someone share their perspective, more often than not, I don't agree with them. But I'm not going to argue with them. Because number 1, do I care? Is it worthwhile my time? And do they want to communicate? Do they want to learn? Remember that I get paid $1,200 an hour to consult with people. And so I want you to think about that for yourself. The people, a mentor of mine told me a long time ago, the people that provide free information, most of the people that give you advice are people that give you advice because everyone has their ideas, everyone has their advice, and advice is free. And the only reason they give it, people that give you advice without your asking for their advice, is because their advice is really not worth much. And so I never argue with people. Unless they want to learn, unless they want to learn something new, or unless they actually want to communicate. And sometimes I gauge that. Sometimes some people leave a comment, send me a message, and I see if they're open. I share with them some ideas and see if they're open. I revisit their premises. And sometimes it's worthwhile communicating with them. Just want to ask them a few questions about their premise. Now remember, there's this guy named Socrates, and he would pretend like he was not very smart, although he was a very smart philosopher. He would ask questions about what the person thinks. Why do you think that? Why? Now, why is that? And as the person explains, now why is that? That's called going back to the premise or the foundation of their thinking. And once you find out what their premise is, you can see why there's a problem down their logical conclusions. So don't argue with people. What I actually do is I build out a case in which it's not an argument. I propose my position in which I never argue. I go deep into that, into greatrelationshipsyou.com. Visit that site, it's incredibly important. The way I go about it is something called careening conversations. That's what I titled in the course. I call it careening conversations. In other words, controlling the conversation, setting the frame. I talk about frame control in that on Great Relationships You. So I careen the conversation, and I just give my position. I talk about my position. I build out a case, but I don't argue. I'm just laying it down. I'm forming for them, I'm communicating with them the case, and without arguing with them, without asking them questions, I'm just saying what my ideas are, and perhaps they'll listen, they are listening, and they will hear new ideas. And once they get new ideas, you circumvent the ego, and they are defenseless against it. I'm going to leave that alone for now. That's going to be for a different topic on a different video. But remember, let's recap. Number one, emotion is not a tool for logic. A lot of people get emotional in logical and debate or in argumentation or in communication, in which case you recognize that emotion is not a tool for logical communication. Number two, attack the problem, not the person. Bring the person up, and they will more often than not be able to get more on your side. Number three, don't argue unless they're open to communication. They're open to arguing, and they want to see your perspective. Some people they just want to talk about their thing, not necessarily to see what you have to say and learn and share ideas. A lot of people are just they're in it to talk about their ideas, and they're not necessarily in it to communicate. In which point, it's not worthwhile to communicate. It might as well just talk about things that you like to talk about and not argue. There's this meme, maybe I'll share it because I don't think I remember it, but it says, okay, here's the meme, and I'll leave it at this. There's a guy that came up with a very smart old fella, and he said, hey, is it true that, you know what, I forgot it. I'm going to leave it alone. Tomorrow's video, I'm going to find it. On tomorrow's video, I'm going to share it with you. It's a great one. It's a good meme. It's in my phone somewhere. All right, I'll talk to you next time. If you like this video, like the video, heart the video. It helps with the algorithm. And leave a comment below. Share your ideas. I would really love to hear what you think. And share this video with other people. You're making the world a better place by sharing these ideas and sharing these ideas with your friends and making their lives better and making the world a better place for you and your friends. I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.